solving equations with perfect squares and square roots. So, we have an equation where we have to get the x by itself right here. We notice that there's a 4 in front and the x is cubed. This 4 in front is called a coefficient. It's being multiplied by the x cubed. So we have to get rid of that first. We do kind of the opposite of the order of operations. We would worry about adding or subtracting first, which we don't see here, then multiplying or dividing, and then we worry about the exponent. So the first thing we have to do is get rid of the 4. We're multiplying by 4, so the opposite is dividing by 4. We have to do that on both sides to keep the equation true. It's a balance. 4 over 4 cancels out because it's 1, and 1 times that x cubed would keep it an x cubed. So there, we got rid of the 4. 32 divided by 4 is 8. Now we have x cubed. This cube needs to go away. So we figure out what the opposite of cubing a number is, and that's the cubed root. So we put that 3 there so it's not a square root, and of course we have to do it to both sides. This cubed root and cube cancel, and we're left with just the x, and then the cubed root of 8 means what times what times what is 8, and of course the answer is 2. Alright, we have x squared divided by 7 equals 28. So this time we have a 7 underneath the x squared. This fraction bar means division. So we have to get rid of the 7 first. So the opposite of dividing by 7 is multiplying by 7. So we're going to multiply by 7 on both sides. And if you're wondering why that 7 is up there, it's because it's really 7 over 1. And we have to have a top and top, bottom and bottom. We could do that over here, but it really doesn't make any difference. So now we have a 7 on top and a 7 on the bottom again, which cancel. So we're left with our x squared equals 28 times 7 is 140, and then 56, so that's 196. Okay, now we have x squared, so we have to get rid of the squared part, so we're going to do the square root on both sides. Remember, always do the same thing on both sides. The square root and the square cancel, so I'm left with my x by itself, and then the square root of 196, you know, is 14. Okay, x cubed divided by 5 equals negative 25. So we know we have a dividing by 5 number here, so we have to do the opposite, which is multiplying by 5 on one side and multiplying by 5 on the other side. The 5 on top and the 5 on bottom will cancel, and we're left with our x cubed equals negative times positive. Always do the sign first. 25 times 5 is 125. So just like we've learned now, we can get rid of a cube by doing a cubed root on both sides. Always remember, do the same thing. The cubed root and the cube cancel, so I'm left with my x equals. Now we have a negative 125 here. Now this isn't square root, so there is a solution here. So we have what times what times what equals negative 125. Well, we know a negative times a negative times a negative is a negative. All right? And then what times what is 125? That'll be 5. So you need to know your cubed roots up to 216. That's 1, 8, 27, 64, 125, and 216. So that's 1 cubed, 2 cubed, 3 cubed, 4 cubed, 5 cubed, and 6 cubed. A 6x squared equals 864. So we have a number in front of the variable part, so we know it's multiplying, so the opposite is dividing by that number. So I'm going to divide by 6 on both sides. The 6 over 6 cancels. And I'm left with my x squared equals, let's do short division. 6 goes into 8 once, that's 6, so there's a 2 left over. 6 goes into 26 4 times, that's 24, so there's a 2 left over. 6 goes into 24 4 times. Now we have to get rid of the square, so we've already learned that we do the square root on both sides. Square root and square cancel. And I'm left with x equals the square root of 144 we know is 12. 3x squared equals 147. The nice thing about solving equations is once you have the steps down, it's just practice to get better at it. So we need to get rid of this 3 first. It's attached because of multiplication. So we're going to divide by 3 on both sides. The 3 on top, 3 on the bottom will cancel. So I'm left with x squared equals, do our short division again. 3 goes into 14 4 times. That's 12. So there's a 2 left over. 3 goes into 27 9 times. Now I have x squared equals 49. So to get rid of the square, I'm going to do the square root. So they cancel. I'm left with x equals square root of 49 is 7. All right, more practice. 21x cubed equals negative 21. So we have a 21 in front. Again, we call the 21 the coefficient. To get rid of it, we're going to divide by 21 on both sides. 21 over 21 cancels. And we're left with x cubed equals, sign first, negative divided by a positive is a negative. 21 divided by 21 is 1. So now we have a cube. So to get rid of the cube, we do the cubed root. Make sure you put that 3 there so it's not a square root. Cubed root on that side. The cubed root and cube cancel. And x equals, remember, we can have a negative on the inside of a cubed root. You just can't have it on a square root where it would be no solution. So what times what is negative 1? Well, we know it's going to be negative. And then the cubed root of 1 is 1. Negative 1 times negative 1 times negative 1 is negative times negative is a negative, and then 1. X squared divided by 5 equals 125. So we're dividing by 5, so we're going to multiply by 5 on both sides. 5 on top, 5 on the bottom will cancel. So I'm left with x squared equals 5 times 125. Well, 5 times the 100 is 600. And 5 times 25 is 125. So 5 times, again, 100 is 500. 5 times 25 is 125. So that together makes 625. Okay, we have a square. So we're going to do the opposite, which is square root. Square and square root cancel. So I'm left with my x by itself. And then the square root of 625, well, we know it ends in a 5. And we know that 20 times 20 is 400. And 30 times 30 is 900. So 625 is between there. So what's between 20 and 30 ends in a 5? Well, of course, that would be 25. So your estimation skills will work here. Okay, 7x squared equals 252. So our coefficient is 7. It's attached to the x squared because of multiplication, so we do the opposite. The opposite of multiplying by 7 is dividing by 7. 7 over 7 cancels. I'm left with x squared equals, do your short division. 7 goes into 25 3 times, that's 21. There's a 4 left over. 7 goes into 42 6 times. Okay, this is square, so the opposite is square root on both sides. Square root and square cancel, so I'm left with my x equals, and the square root of 36 is 6. Negative 6x cubed equals 162. So here we have a negative 6 for our coefficient. It's attached because of multiplication, so the opposite is dividing, and we must divide by a negative 6. Whatever the coefficient is, we have to do the same thing on the bottom. So it can't be a positive 6, it has to be a negative 6. Do the same thing to the other side. Negative 6 over negative 6 cancels. So I'm left with x cubed equals, okay, do your sign first. A positive divided by negative is a negative. And then short division, 6 goes into 16 twice, that's 12. So there'd be a 4 left over. 6 goes into 42 7 times. Okay, we have a cube, so the opposite is cubed root. Cubed root and the cube cancel. So I'm left with x equals, again, we have that negative on the inside of a cubed root, so we know it's going to be negative because we've already practiced it a couple other times. And then what times what times what is 27, and that's 3. So you have to have those first 6 perfect cubes memorized. And E, x cubed divided by 16 equals 4. So I'm dividing by 16, so we know the opposite is multiplying by 16 on both sides. The reason I'm using a denominator is you're going to have fractions later on, so you got to get used to knowing where the top is and where the bottom is. 16 on top, 16 on the bottom, cancels. So I'm left with x cubed equals 4 times 16 is 64. So I have a cube, so we know that the opposite is a cubed root. Cubed root and the cube cancel. So I'm left with x equals, and then what times what times what is 64, and that would be 4. The important part about this lesson, these video solutions, is that when you practice, you get much better at it because you just continually do the same thing over and over and over again. So when you model something that's been done for you correctly, then the practice makes perfect, as that saying goes. All right, good job, and you'll be able to do this on your homework.